Amanda.
And I'm Mel.
And this is the Road Back Home podcast,
where we share real conversations about midlife, sobriety, and sisterhood.
So we've been getting really great feedback on the podcast. We wanted to say thank you to the listeners for listening. It's really great to have you here. And, I've definitely gotten some messages or, text messages, emails, whatever. And so have you. We've got some nice comments on Substack as well. We even have some subscribers having pledged to, to support us with a paid membership when we do turn that on. Don't know when that will be yet, but we will be turning that on at some point. And it'll be like $5 a month or something like that. But we haven't even mentioned it or asked for that. And people have pledged, which is great.
I'm getting texts and I'm getting emails. And, it was funny. One of the moms dropped her child off to my drama class. And I don't know this mom very well. And as she dropped her child into the class, she said, by the way, she said, what a brave and courageous podcast. And then she walked away. And I was standing there going, why do I feel completely naked?
It is. It's quite vulnerable because it's like, some complete stranger will come up to you and be like, oh, hey, I'm listening to the podcast. Love it. By the way, how's the diarrhea? Like, oh yeah, forgot I was talking about my bowel movements last week. How embarrassing.
But I'm really enjoying the various, and when I say various, such a variety of different personalities reaching out, and each of them, finding a perspective to enjoy and relate to. And, I had a couple of people tell me that your, steps that you kind of lay out as folks to implement into their own scenarios have helped them. So I'm very excited that we are not just having these discussions with ourselves, by ourselves, but that we're building a community and helping people too.
Yeah. So we're very grateful. Thank you for listening. Keep listening and share, if you do want to support us. And I mean, we're doing this for its own value as it is. We're enjoying this time of chatting to each other once a week anyway. But we would, the more comments, the more sharing, spread the word, that would really support us going forward. We've been talking kind of privately off the air about an interesting phenomenon that I think a lot of people would relate to, and it is about when friendships, or basically it is about the fight, flight, freeze response, and then there is the fourth F, and that is the fawn response. And specifically the fawn response in relationships, whether they are friendships or intimate relationships, whatever they are, because friendships are intimate relationships, but the fawn response in relationships and how it manifests, and also, of course, ways to break free and reclaim our personal power, and so that we can have more authentic relationships and connections with people. This can be quite a massive revelation. It can be quite shocking, wouldn't you say, Mel, to realize, that, to arrive at a point in a relationship where there is a conflict, something happens in the relationship. It's almost like the facade gives, and there is a conflict or a confrontation that creates a massive reaction in you. Like you have a massive reaction to this conflict. And in the trying to understand why you have such a massive reaction to the argument or whatever has happened, realizing that it's because you have been essentially fawning in this dynamic the whole time. Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, no, I want you to define fawning.
Okay.
I understand what fawning means, but I think when we give a very clear definition, particularly in the context to this, it might just put people into the right frame of mind.
So fawning is a response to stress or some kind of perceived threat, and in which a person will seek safety through through the appeasement of others, often at the expense of their own needs and boundaries. And so it's very, very closely related to people pleasing, which comes up so much in these episodes.
Yeah.
But the fawning response, just like, we've all heard of the fight or flight response, and you may have even heard of the freeze response. Fight is when you move towards the source of that perceived threat or stress. You kind of like you meet it head on. Think of the image of the stags, like going at each other with antlers or something like that. They go in for the kill kind of a thing. Or the flight is the deer that perceives some kind of a threat and runs away. The freeze response is the possum that, just perceives the threat and then it's like, no, I'm dead, like nothing to see here. And then the fawn response is almost like the golden retriever response. Um, and you just start wagging your tail and what can I do for you? How can I be a good girl, good boy? And the reason we're doing that is because we're trying to seek safety from this this stressful person or situation. And in this context, we are talking about people because we're talking about it in the context of relationships. And so really what's at the base of this reaction is the desire to avoid conflict
Mhm.
or to gain that person's approval, to kind of like try and get harm, to protect yourself. It's a self-preservation to protect yourself against any kind of like difficult or, like yeah, any kind of a difficult situation with somebody who ultimately, if you let yourself know the truth, you feel intimidated around for whatever reason. Doesn't mean that they are intimidating you. It just means that there's something about you, like what we spoke about in last week's episode about the instincts. Like you don't feel like this is a person that around whom you can feel safe, supported, and connected. And so
Right.
rather than disconnect from this person and distance yourself, which would be the healthy response if you're listening to your instincts, you may fawn and that you'll go out of your way to accommodate them, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's inconvenient for you. And over time, then this leads to a pattern of self-suppression and almost like subservience in the relationship. And you almost think like you're earning safety. Like, I have built up so much credit of goodwill with this person, they couldn't possibly ever have an argument with me, you know?
Mhm.
And we do this like we prioritize the serving of this goodwill with this person over honoring our true feelings and our true needs. And so that can create a dynamic in relationships where you can feel emotionally trapped if you are constantly appeasing or accommodating somebody difficult, um, because it's not real. It's not real. And what ends up happening is that the nature of the beast eventually reveals itself. It's a strategy that works, in other words. It's why we do it. Generally, humans don't do things that don't work. So it's a strategy that works until it doesn't work.
Mhm.
And I've definitely had that experience where I will fawn my ass off in a friendship or in a relationship or something. I'm just like, instead of distancing myself from this person, I've concocted some story, you know,
Mhm.
where I'm forcing a closeness with them
Mhm.
it's almost like Stockholm syndrome. I'm forcing a closeness with them for a sense of safety. And then what ends up happening is that, they, the nature of the beast is what it is. And eventually that threat, it does materialize.
Mhm.
And I have the shock, first of all, of the materializing of that threat, and also the shock of being now defenseless.
God, it's the way you describe it, I mean, is it's trauma, basically, at the end of the day. The way they often say keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Ugh.
Do you think that has a place here in this conversation? Does it have that same context of keep your enemies closer so that, you know, you can appear as though you're not enemies? Is it kind of like, you know, to keep yourself under the radar? I mean, that's living in fear, which I have
Yeah.
experience with, from friendships for sure.
Yeah. But it's not conscious. It's not conscious. We
Mm.
don't realize we're doing it. And for anybody, and there will be a spoiler alert in this, if you haven't seen the movie Sixth Sense yet, don't continue with this conversation because I'm about to spoil one of the best, you know, plot twists I've
Pause.
ever seen. Go and watch it. One of the best plot twists I've ever seen. But there is a moment in The Sixth Sense where the protagonist, who is Bruce Willis, finally accepts the truth of his situation. And in the acceptance of that truth, starts to think back on everything that has just transpired in the lead up to that truth, but because he wasn't in acceptance of the truth, he was interpreting completely differently. It just changes the color, it colors everything going backwards. And it is a moment of the rug is pulled out from under me. Nothing is as it seems. Who am I now? Like, if that wasn't true, like in your entire thing that you have constructed is no longer what it was. And essentially, you get that dissonance. So, what was your question?
No, I was just asking if that saying, keep your friends close and your enemies closer, has any relevance here, if that's a further, damaging adage that we have in our
Yeah, I
everyday
suppose
life.
it is. That feels like I've never really liked that saying because that is very, it just feels very conniving to me. And that gives me a sense, like it makes me very, very sad to think, like one of the things that I don't like is, there are some people who will just tell you anything you want to hear. I don't like that. Yeah, and it's probably because I value, authenticity so much, is that like I dread to think that somebody would be keeping me in their life because, you know, like for not for the right reasons.
Hmm.
Like I'll give you an example. I remember having a friend one time, she was an artist friend, and she was complaining about um that none of her friends and family were buying her art. And she was very offended about this. And she thought that it was, nobody is supporting me kind of a thing. And that, in fact, underneath that, I said to her, what is really going on here is underneath this resentment that you have is a belief that they should be supporting you, that your family and friends should be the ones buying your art. And she was like, well, I didn't, it wasn't a conscious thought. And I said, but it is there. Like that is basically the reason that you're disappointed that they're not is because you have a belief that they should be. I said, so let me ask you this. If that's the case, what do you want a person's motivation to be for buying your art? Do you want them
Mm,
to buy your art because it inspires them, or do they want to buy your art for fear that you will resent them if they don't?
yeah, big difference.
Big difference. And I don't want anybody doing that with me. I don't want anybody supporting me because they're afraid that I'll confront them if they don't, you know? So like I don't like that phrase, keep your friends close and your
No,
enemies closer. I
it
really
never
don't.
it never sat well with me either because it always felt like a saying that was perpetuating the toxicity of a situation. If there's an enemy on the line and you're keeping them closer, for fear of being the next one on their chopping board, I mean, it's very difficult to move forward in life without that
Mm.
being underlying reason for anxiety and fear and doubt and
Yeah.
it spills into everything.
And it's also like it's also a commitment to live with an activated nervous system.
Yeah, keep your friends close and your enemies as far the fuck away as you possibly can, is what the saying
Yeah.
should be.
Yeah, exactly. Or even, keep your like have boundaries with friends and people who are not your friends. Like just let's just change it to how about have some boundaries? So we've both had situations in the past where we've had what would you say, perceived friendship, or let's just say stressful friendships. We've had friendships that were stressful in nature, but which we never really allowed ourselves to acknowledge as being stressful, but which we put an awful lot of energy towards maintaining, which, of course, made us liars because we were pretending unconsciously to actually be um, to be one thing, but when really our friendship with the individual was based in fear. And it was
Mm.
also based in the suppression of our own instincts and that fawning response. Well, if I'm a really good dog who keeps wagging his tail and fetching the ball and all, like if I'm like, well, then I'm just going to be loved by this and I'm going to be safe, and this person will just see me as a good person and will never what I have sensed as being dangerous about them will never come to pass. I'll never be the target. Even though you might see how lots of other people in their life, like this, there's also other signs. Like this person might be somebody who doesn't get much approval from your other friends or from your family.
Yeah.
Or this person might be somebody who doesn't really have many seemingly friends in their lives or even in their family. And there are flags. There's so
Mm.
many flags.
There are flags, and then there's something else that overrides, and I'm going to guess that it's, fear of insert various words. Um, and in the friendship that I'm thinking about, I remember also my family members and friends who disapproved of this person or who just weren't taking to this person. I found myself building upon something very small, like a small redeeming trait. And I found myself bringing that to friends and family who didn't necessarily align with this person to give them a redeeming quality so that my friends and my family members who, just weren't feeling it in the way I was would have something to consider, like, oh, maybe this person is, great, or, whatever I was announcing that the person was. Almost like I needed the support of my mom. I needed the support of my sister. I needed the support of my husband for them all to say, oh, I've met that person. And yeah, great person, in
Yeah,
order to validate what I knew that I was doing from the beginning, which was trying to force a friendship.
yeah, yes. It's so true. And then you start building a case for the person who
Hmm.
isn't being liked by your safe people.
Exactly. They
And,
did this, they said that. They're kind in this way. It literally building a character that's not really there.
yeah. And I wonder how much of it as well is about it goes back to the idea of boundaries. It's like, is there some kind of, are we just, first of all, yes, we are unskilled at boundaries because on some level, at some point, we probably did assert a boundary and then were punished for the boundary.
Yeah.
When we were too young to understand, first of all, what boundaries were and how to do them, and also how to actually have enough autonomy that that boundary could actually, that we could actually um what would you say, assert the bound, like if you're trying to have a boundary when you're young and like you're still a kid and you're living at home, you can't really there's nothing really you can do about it if your boundaries are violated. It's not like as if you can throw your parent out of the house,
Yeah.
or be like, well, if this continues, I'm going to, go and live somewhere else. You can't do that. You can't really enact consequences for the breaking of the boundaries. So if you're somebody who has had boundaries violated as a young person, what you've kind of learned is, for a start, they don't work. you know, and or they weren't worth putting in place because there was a payback, there was some kind of scolding or punishment or something
Mm.
put in place. And essentially then what we learned, because again, this goes back to what works. And so if boundaries didn't work, but fawning did, well, then fawning is going to become your strategy to stay safe.
Mm. I also wonder if it comes with a challenge. Like I always find this need to find a redeeming quality in somebody, particularly somebody who is in my circle, not necessarily by my choice, but because of another circumstance, in the family. Maybe it's through our kids, or maybe it's through my business, or maybe it's, through my husband. But, having someone who I know is going to be in my life for the unforeseeable future, not necessarily by my choice, who I, very clearly feel uncomfortable around. However, in order for me to be okay with them being in my company, I need to create an environment. So it very much goes back to the people pleasing again. And for me, it's
Yeah.
like, what redeeming qualities? And it doesn't have to be redeeming, because that implies that the person is a terrible person to everybody, right? They might just not be my cup of tea.
Mm.
And sometimes that's harder for me when I see, this person with, seemingly hundreds of friends. And also being somebody who claims to, oh, know everybody and is friends with everybody. Um, and you start questioning yourself then, because you're like, well, if they're getting on well with everybody, and if, they've 2,000 friends on Facebook. You see, social media also is it's so deceptive. It creates this illusion that, oh, this person has 2,000 friends, so therefore they must be great, and I'm clearly the one with the problem, and I should just
Mm.
ignore those red flags and find qualities about this person that will lead me to see them for who they really are, because clearly the other 2,000 people can see that. um but that's first of all abandoning my own instincts, and secondly, falling for the deceptive world that social media has created. But yeah, I find that I try to find the good in even people who, like, I had a friend the other day who actually reached out to me, who texted me to say that they had met somebody in our community, a business owner in our community, and that they were so disappointed when they met them, because on social media they were excited to meet them, they supported their product, they were looking forward to meeting them at an upcoming event, and they met them, and her exact words was, she was such a bitch. And I'm so disappointed because I love her product, but she's such a bitch. And I got into this text thing, this back and forth, where I was like, I feel that she can be abrupt, but I wouldn't go so far as to call her a bitch, because she supports these causes, and, she's a kind person. And my friend came back and said, she's a bitch. Like, the end. There are no redeeming qualities for me. I had an interaction with her. I don't fucking like her. And I'm stepping away. And I realized in that interaction that I was, even for her, trying to find redeeming qualities in this person that my friend had deemed, sorry, not somebody I want to be involved with. She was done. She was up,
Mm.
listening to her instincts, saw a few red flags and was like, I'm just done. I'm just, that person I was off my list, moving on. And part of me is like, that must be so liberating to just listen to your gut and to move on. And the other part of me is like, do we give up on people that quickly?
That's a really good point, because it's so much easier to walk away when it's, just that simple, that black and white, like, oh, just bitch. And I'm remembering about even like, relationship, a very significant relationship in my life, that when it was ending, I remember thinking to myself, like, you never walk away from all bad. Like, there are redeeming features. And everybody, if you look, if you care to look, everybody will have some redeeming features. And maybe we try to, it's not that we try too hard, but I think it also comes down to effort as well. And it's a generous nature. It's a very generous thing to spend time reflecting and looking at the person as a whole, and saying, well, they're not entirely, like they're not all bad. Like, there are some redeeming features, and that can maybe make it harder for us to maybe just assign them the label of bitch, and therefore it's end of story conclusion. Like, that concluding of a person's character, like, it doesn't even make sense, because like, there is no static thing. Like, it's very rigid to think like that. And I just don't think like that. I will find redeeming character, and it's maybe a form of empathy as well, which can make the task of having to have boundaries much harder. And then there's other things, such as, like, what harmony looks like in your mental model. So, for example, uh, let's talk about, as you said, like, sometimes there will be people who are maybe friends by proxy. They're not necessarily your friends, or else you've decided that you don't want to be friends. But if another family member, or else they are a family member, they're just somebody who is going to be in your life. And the hard boundary of complete absence isn't available to you. That's a very nuanced. How do I have an emotional boundary here with this person, or a cognitive boundary? If I can't have a physical boundary, how do I do that? And so, I'll give you an example of how it works in my brain. It's almost like I overvalue, or I don't know if overvalue is the right word, but I overemphasize friendliness as a mark of civility.
Oh, say
You
that
know,
again.
I overemphasize friendliness as a mark of civility, right? So,
Mm.
it's almost like, if I'm not being friendly to you, I'm not being civil to you, right? And I've kind of, like, managed to do away with that a little bit. So now I can be in the company of people to whom I'm just not going to give energy. Um, and this is like, that friendliness is a certain amount of energy. So it's almost like, for a while, until I figured that out, I felt like, if I'm not going to give my energy to this person and be super friendly to them, well, then, like, I just don't know how else to be, or it's going to be obvious to them, or I just can't do that. I can't
Right.
be around a person. So it's, in a way, I'm being all or nothing. I'm either ghosting you, or, the
Yeah.
golden retriever and licking the face off you, like you know, whereas I have figured out now how to be in the presence of somebody and be civil towards them and around them, without actually giving them any energy.
Oh, share, because do you know what I'm thinking now, actually, Amanda, as well. And because we are recording these podcasts a little bit in advance of their release, I'm not sure where this one is going to fall. But at the moment, with holidays on the horizon, and there's always a holiday on the horizon, so it doesn't matter when this is released. There are several holidays a year. But I do know that holidays can be a very stressful time for families who are exactly in what you are talking about now, the situation where they have to be in a space together, not by choice. And I suppose, how do they practice what you're talking about?
Mm,
How do you exist in a room, um, you know, and give as little energy as possible to the people who are undeserving of it, without being rude, without being passive aggressive, because those are things that, have their own set of consequences.
mm,
And I would love to learn how to be in a space and not give off a ghosting, rude, passive aggressive vibe, but to
yeah,
also not abandon myself and, turn into the golden retriever, because that's usually my default.
yeah, yeah. Um, Okay, so there's several layers to this, and I think it was only in last week's episode where we did the resentment, where we did the resentment process. So, for example, if you're in a room with somebody that, let's just say you have a cousin and you have a beef with your cousin, right? But you have to go to the funeral, right? That's where you
Yeah.
meet cousins. But um, let's just say you have a beef with that cousin. If you don't have it resolved within you, this is going to be much, much harder. So you have to come to a place of neutrality within you for a start around this person, because what muddies the water here in having the boundary of, civil without friendliness, is that if I have a resentment and I'm carrying it, there's a part of me that's going to want to communicate fuck you to the person,
Hmm.
or to want to, like, I need you to know you're in the doghouse with me.
Yeah.
You're going to come in bringing that energy. Like, I need them to know I'm mad at them. I need them to know they did something wrong. I need to punish them. So that can be going on. And if that is going on, you're never going to be able to do the thing that I'm going to kind of demonstrate in terms of like the civility without the niceties. Because your energy is going to be in fuck you territory. You did
Which is
wrong to me.
exhausting.
It is. And it is the you did wrong to me. And also it is that I'm going to make you sorry. So
It's
if that is
vengeful.
it is, and it's wounded. It's a wounded thing. It's like do you remember, interestingly, when we would run to mam or nana about each other, like whether it was in our own house with siblings or whether it was in the aunties' houses with all the cousins, and somebody would wallop somebody and you'd go running to them. Mel is after hitting me. What would she say?
Hit her back.
There you go. That was it. That was it. That's what we were told. Well, hit her back.
Yeah, it's so true.
And then we'd go back into the room, confident as fuck, because now we had permission to be violent. And my punch to you doesn't count
Yeah,
because, first of all, you brought it on yourself. You started it,
and
and
you
this
got
is my
permission.
and this is my revenge. And I've been already blessed in advance. I have got the blessing in advance that this is the right way to do it.
Oh man, I often talk to well, I was going to say my cousin, but she's your cousin too. But Donna, we often talk about this and just how we were raised and the things that were said, and some of the stuff I just want to bring back, the good old-fashioned parenting. And then in
Yeah,
other ways, when I look at it, I think, oh my God, how fucking traumatized are we from all of that?
yeah. That's what you get for being a tattletale.
Yeah. You won't be doing that again. And then you've no one to run to when someone beats the shite out of you. You just take it.
Yeah. So this idea of hit them back, right? So I'll get over. I had a circumstance a good few years ago, and it took me 3 years to resolve it. Right? I had a grudge with somebody, and something it happened between us, let's say, and they were mad at me about it, and then I got mad with them being mad at me about it. I got resentful
Mm.
that they were, kind of like mad at me, but not communicating. Nobody was communicating it. And I could not get past it, Mel. I couldn't get past it no matter what I did. I had Archangel Michael on the job. At the time I had I had I still have the box here. Like, I have a little box here
Hold,
that's
hold on,
almost
stop for a second now. Hold on, slow down. What does Archangel Michael do?
Archangel
Archangel
Michael.
Michael.
Oh my God, that reminds me of that prayer. Do you remember when you'd be going to say,
By the
now
way,
I
is
lay
he
me
here?
down to sleep?
Is he here? Do you see the light shining in? I know our listener can't, but look.
I do. I prayed the Lord my soul to keep. And if I die before I wake, and you'd be like, excuse
Yeah, oh no,
me?
terrified. And then mom would be like, good night, love. And you'd be left in your bed going, but what if I
So Archangel Michael is the
die?
angel of cutting cords. cutting toxic cords, right?
Didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. And so if you go on YouTube and you search Archangel Michael meditation, or negative energy cutting meditation. So I was literally like, I have even a box here devoted to Archangel Michael, and I would write
Yeah.
down the resentment and put it in the box and do the meditation. And I had at one point I had a therapist, I had a coach, and I had a spiritual counselor
And Michael.
and Michael all on the job. Like this grudge kept coming up on all these sessions, and I couldn't let it go.
Mm.
And then there was one day I had a breakthrough, and I did some work. It's actually called The Work. It's the work of Byron Katie, and we'll do it someday, maybe on this podcast. But it's a very simple process. But what I had to identify what it was. What is the belief here that's tripping me up? Because no matter how I try and get rid of this grudge or get past it, I keep coming back to the resentment. And after 3 years, I discovered the belief. And
How
that
did
belief,
you-
3 years. And this is why when I'm working with clients and they're like, "Oh, you must be sick listening to me going around in circles about this," and I'm like, "I'm not, because I've been there, and I know it can take 3 years, 8 years. It can take a long, long time to get to the heart of
Yeah.
what's holding you back here, and it's not wasted time either. It just more is revealed and more is revealed, and you get closer and you get put, or you think you're over it, and then something happens and you're not. So." I discovered anyway, after all of this time, a very simple, you'd kick yourself how simple it is, that I had an unwritten rule that was never spoken, that I was not conscious about. And that rule is, you are not allowed to hurt my feelings.
Mm. Right.
That was a commandment. And God help you if you did. And you
Mm.
especially weren't allowed to hurt my feelings because I was so fucking careful with yours.
Right. So
I've
it was
been
a
walking
condition.
on eggshells around your bullshit.
Mm.
I have been over here trying to not hurt your feelings. I have forced myself into a friendship with you to not to spare you the discomfort of me not being your friend.
Yeah.
And now you're going to hurt my feelings? How
Right. Okay.
dare you? How dare you?
So it was a massive condition.
100%. It was a commandment. You broke a
Yeah.
fucking commandment. You're not
Wow.
allowed to hurt my feelings. And then,
Mm.
go on,
No,
underneath that,
yeah.
go on,
Go on, go
go
on. No,
on.
it's so juicy. Just go, go, go.
Underneath that, then you kind of like you play with this sentence a little bit to see what else is there. And what else was there was that I was unwilling to have hurt feelings.
Wow. Do you
So how
remember?
is that? Oh, I remember it lifting. I remember it dissolving like that. Once I came on that idea, you are not allowed hurt my feelings. How dare you? And that was underneath how dare, because I kept coming back to how dare you? How dare you? And when you have a kind of an how dare you reaction to somebody, it's because they've broken a commandment and you have to figure out what that commandment was.
Now, did you rewrite your commandment?
Yes, yes. So
So
now,
is it kind of like it becomes a preference rather than a
nope.
rule? No.
No, I'll tell you what it becomes. Because first of all, it was like, you are not allowed to hurt my feelings, but I can't do anything about that. So I can't change what you're going to do. So my new belief, I threw out that one. You're not allowed to hurt my feelings. And now it is, I am willing to have my feelings hurt. I am
Mm.
willing to experience hard feelings. Like now that's not a problem for me. So when somebody gives me a shit sandwich that hurts my feelings, I take that on as being something that I can and will endure. So now it's not a deal breaker anymore. If you hurt my feelings, I don't have to come down on you with the weight of 10,000 boulders. I don't have to hit you back. I don't have to hurt you back
Mm.
because my hurt feelings are mine. They're not anything that you did to me, let's say. There's something that I was left with after the encounter, and they will certainly inform my interactions with you going forward.
Mm.
But ultimately, if I am unwilling to experience hard feelings or hurt feelings, that is a me problem, you know?
Wow. Have you had a situation since then that the new commandment has been helpful with?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Um, I'm trying to think of an exact one, but it happens all the time now, you know. So when I catch that flare, you know, that flurry of anger or rage or indignation is what it is, that might want to come up when somebody breaks, you know. So I kind of recognize it in my body. And what I can say to myself on the spot was, oh yeah, you know, I'm willing to, you know, be inconvenienced in this way. You know, it's not, it's just like I can either go around thinking, how dare you inconvenience me like this, and then let you live in my head rent free for 3 years,
Mm.
or I can sit with myself and work on the willingness to be inconvenienced.
Because, you know, as I sit here, you know, I feel that myself and listeners will all have at least a situation where they have carried something around with them for weeks, months, and possibly years, and possibly decades, that they are wondering how to actually stop thinking about,
Yeah.
how to get to the bottom of it, how to release it. Is it
Hmm.
harder the longer it lives in your brain to get rid of it? Is it easier?
No, I think once you understand at the heart of it all is acceptance, right? And a lot of the problem is non-acceptance, you know? So my non-acceptance of how you showed up that created hard feelings in me
Mm,
is actually where the real work is. It is not, but where I place my energy is trying to communicate to you that you know, the fuck you or the punishment. You know, so it goes back to this idea of crime and punishment. You committed a crime and you must be punished. And I don't, and it's like I'm relying on that sense of justice to make my, you know, to restore some sense of calm in me, but there never will be justice because that's not the way this works. You know, it's not about crime and punishment. If you remember, I think, did I go all, I'll say it again because I have said it before that another thing that I learned as I was studying, let's say I was doing spiritual studies, is that the words that we know today as sin and penance were originally intended as wound and healing. So if you think of crime and punishment in the same paradigm or the same dichotomy or whatever the word there might be, but in the same frame, that this is actually a wound and a healing. So instead of you having committed a crime against me for which you now must be punished,
you've
there,
wounded me.
yeah, there is a wound. I am wounded now, and what I need is healing,
Mm,
not justice. Like that's what the justice is. But I don't need you to also be wounded. So now that we're both fucking wounded.
eye for an eye, yeah.
Eye for an eye. And then Paul Simon in one of his songs, I think it's Graceland, where he talks about, no, it's not, it's Hearts and Bones. What an amazing song. And he talks about the 1.5 wandering Jews arguing over who had been damaged the most. You know, it's in the end of a love affair. And he's talking about the resentment that arises in the end of something, you know, something that ends badly or whatever. And all of it is so true. It's like my energy, instead of going towards my healing, my energy is going towards, first of all, argue. And there's a constant internal argument about who has been damaged the most here.
Hmm.
Who's been hurt the most? Who's been wounded the most? Who's wrong? Who's right?
Right.
Who
Yeah.
needs to be made wrong? Who needs to be made aware that they were wrong? Who needs to be called account for wrong? So you're basically turning yourself into judge and jury, you know?
Yeah.
And
Oh God, we've all done it where we've spent fucking hours and upon
mm,
hours
Mm.
And in our head, we have the fantasy of how it could go, how it should have gone, how it will go when I see you the next time, rather than turning it inward and healing ourselves.
In what way am I wounded here? And how am I the one holding the dagger?
Mm,
And the way I was the one holding the dagger in that scenario was because I was the one standing there fuming because you broke my rule about
mhm,
hurting my feelings. How
mm.
dare you? Now,
Isn't
that is a very
it?
rigid way to be.
Mhm. It's very interesting to me that in a standoff, let's say, in a relationship where there is an argument, how both parties a lot of the time can leave feeling right, feeling that they are the ones who have been wronged. And ultimately, what they both need is to heal something,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of the times you can't do that together. It's a
Hmm.
an individual issue.
Hmm.
And I think that aligns with the fact that person A is like, I was right. Person B is like, no, I was. You should be punished. No, you should be punished. Well, you said that. Well, you said this. So there's work to be done on both sides. There's
And
healing
when
to,
it, yeah, and when it is done on both sides, it's beautiful. And that's our story.
that's our story.
Like we would not be where we are today had we not both gone to our respective corners and been like, okay, like this relationship is worth more to me than my fucking commandments.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
do I need to let go of in order for this to be salvaged? It doesn't work when only one person's doing the work.
Oh, it's kind of after giving me goosebumps that this whole time we've been talking about something that the two of us can actually completely relate to
Yeah, so we've
in
done
our
it
in our
right.
in our own story.
Yeah, like we've done it right too. Like we've done it. We've I don't want to say that we've done it right and we've done it wrong, but like we've had resolution here. Like we have done this. We have done it in the way that it resulted in something more deeper, more authentic, more meaningful,
Mm,
more real. And then it has because both of us were on board with it. And then we have also tried to do it with unwilling parties, or we have been an unwilling party
hmm
or we have participated in all parties are unwilling kind of a thing. So, I want to read something here because getting back to this idea of how to be civil, without the friendliness,
hmm
it's very important that this part be addressed first. Like you're just not going to be able to do this unless you resolve this thing. So if you need to put to bed the resentment that you have for this person having trampled on your daisies, or your whatever your precious flowers are.
Me
That they,
hydrangeas.
the hydrangeas, yeah, they stepped on. Those signs, don't step on the lawn
Yeah.
when I was a teenager. I mean, talk about a fucking invitation, you
Oh
know?
yeah.
Like I would see your
River
rule and I'd be
dance.
like, fuck your rule, I'm about to break it. Like so it's so funny that I had such stringent rules myself and then I was so incensed when people would break it. How interesting. But I'm going to read this to you. This is a piece from the Big Book, being the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And about acceptance. And it speaks to this specific situation. So this is before you can even consider civility without friendliness, acceptance is your work. So it goes, and acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. When I'm disturbed, it's because I find some person, place, or situation, some fact of my life unacceptable to me, and I can find no serenity until I accept that person, place, or thing or situation as being exactly the way it is supposed to be at this moment. Nothing, absolutely nothing happens in this world by mistake. So, like, unless I can accept life on life's terms, I cannot be happy. And I need to concentrate not so much on what needs to be changed in the world, as on what needs to be changed in me and my attitudes. Now, here's the thing about acceptance, because there's a very easy argument out of this, which is, well, what if they're murderers? Do I have to accept that? Like, what if they really hurt? Like, what if the crime they committed is an actual crime? You know, what if it's a war crime? You're telling me I'm supposed to accept that, but it's
True.
not acceptable. It's not acceptable. But here's the thing. This is not acceptance is not, oh well, it's not the same as condoning. It's not the same as betraying your values. What they really mean here is there is no point in telling yourself something that did happen and is happening shouldn't have or shouldn't be happening. Acceptance means I mightn't like it, but it is happening. So therefore, the should that it, the fact that it shouldn't have happened is literally me living in fantasy land
Mm-hmm.
because it is happening. And so I need to get past my anger about it. Like, it's not that I need to get past my anger about it, but I need to get past my indignance that it is happening so that I can access the anger that is going to get me to act in the appropriate way, whether that be having a boundary, going out and voting, whatever the thing. So acceptance doesn't mean that you're not going to do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
Acceptance doesn't mean that you're not going to follow through on the fact that this is not okay with you. But what it does mean is that you're going to stop arguing that it shouldn't have happened.
Is it like acceptance without judgment? So accepting and not judging. I'm accepting it, but it shouldn't have happened. It happened. The end, period.
Yes. Yes, yeah, it's the argument that you were having that is useless is it shouldn't have happened. She shouldn't have done that. She shouldn't have said this. She shouldn't have been like that. She shouldn't have thought that thing. She
Having an
shouldn't have said
opinion
that
about
thing.
it.
It's whatever the shouldn't is
Hmm.
or the should. She should have given me a chance to, explain myself. How dare she just cut me off without a chance to explain myself? How dare she?
Hmm.
And that you end up then in that energetic wormhole that is stirring up all kinds of rage, and it's making you plot and plan
Yeah.
and argue in the shower and argue in the car every fucking moment where you could have peace.
Yes. And you could be working on rewriting your set of rules, rewriting your commandments, rewriting your conditions.
Yeah, or like me this morning when I was coming out, I was doing my sauna and I had enough mental and emotional space within myself to just stand there in awe of the mist on the lake. And there was
Mm.
no intrusive thoughts in that moment of fucking bitch, how dare she, blah, 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 blah. Nobody was, what's the word I'm looking for? Nobody was,
Infiltrating.
yeah, and freeloading. Nobody was freeloading on my self-care.
Yeah.
I didn't have any
Well,
freeloaders.
the ultimate goal is being able to do that,
Yeah.
to stand in the mist, to go for a walk, to have a
Mm,
bath, to take a shower, to
mm,
fall asleep at night without intrusive,
mm,
infiltrating thoughts,
yeah.
particularly vengeful ones that create anxiety and dis-ease.
Mm. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to get a willingness in you to have hard things happen,
And you not lose your inner peace over it, but instead,
that you can actually act out of a place of clarity. And then you go, oh my God, that's what I'm really mad about. I'm really mad about the fact that my feelings were hurt. And I have a secret rule that people shouldn't hurt other people's feelings. And then you start to see, you have that sixth sense moment where you're like, oh my God, I see now how I'm walking on eggshells in other people's lives because I'm
Mm.
afraid of them having hard feelings, or I'm over accommodating to people. And all of that is building up a case in my favor that if I'm being this person, the minute someone does it to me, I'm outraged. So you have to let go. And so that's what I did. I ended up going into in my new era, the grudge resolves. And that's what happens. You'll feel it dissolve when you come across the right, or not the right word, but the accurate thing. So I was like, you're not allowed to hurt my feelings. And I was able to turn around to say, I am willing to have my feelings hurt. This is the work that needs to happen before you can be in a space with somebody around whom you can be civil without being a lapdog, without being friendly.
Oh, that's where we were.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like, so that ultimate goal of being in the company of somebody that you just don't love.
Yeah.
Being in the company of, but you can tolerate because you're not giving energy towards it. So that's not going to be possible until you resolve this matter. So whatever the resentment you have about this person, whatever beef you have with this person must be resolved within you before you can be in the company of them in a civil way without being friendly. So, for example, one like the most interesting thing that I've learned to do is to learn how to suppress my urges to essentially fawn in a situation. So when I'm in the company of somebody that I've decided, my boundary is just, I'm not going to engage with them, but I can be in their company. So I can be like, I can just say, hi, Paul, and then not be like trying to make conversation. So I'm sitting in the uncomfortable silence of not actually engaging with them. So I'm not making small talk. I'm not responding. I'm just not engaging. I'm in their company and I'm being civil, and there is a hello and there's a goodbye and there's an excuse me and would you pass the salt, please? And there's all of that communication happening, but there's no me trying to make small talk. There's no me trying to cover the fact that I have a hostility. There's none of that. There's no me feigning friendliness or even giving friendliness, So all the civilities are there. I'm still treating the person as a person, like with a bit of dignity.
Right. I cannot wait to be fully confident in people around me and my boundaries up with the appropriate people, and the red flags come to me right away. And it's, as a friend of mine says, wisdom. It's wisdom. With age comes wisdom.
Yeah.
And I look forward to all of that. I'm so happy that I've already started and that I'm so far along in that journey. Because as uncomfortable as it is to uproot some of these things, it's much more uncomfortable for me to sit on my laurels and do nothing about it and fawn and fawn and fawn and facade and pretend everything is okay when it's not.
Yes, because you all you're doing is kicking the can down the road. That's all you're doing when you're fawning, is that you're setting yourself up to finally, for the chicken to finally come home to roost, and to kind of like demonstrate to you why your instincts were right in the beginning and make you kick yourself for not trusting them.
Right. Yeah.
And as always, thank you for listening. Keep listening, and do please share, comment as well. We would love more engagement on the Substack. Tell us your stories, give us some ideas about what you'd like us to discuss, and keep her lit.
Until next time.
Bye.